Steelers Nation, hold on to your terrible towels because what I'm about to tell you is going to change how you look at this entire 2026 season. A massive addition just flew under the radar, the roster is getting revamped, and there are some serious questions we need to address about where this franchise is headed. Make sure you smash that subscribe button right now because we're breaking down everything happening in Pittsburgh, and trust me, you do not want to miss a single update on your black and gold. All right, let's dive right in. I want to start with something that honestly shocked me when I really sat down and thought about it. Michael Pittman Jr. is a Pittsburgh Steeler. Yeah, you heard that right. Michael Pittman Jr. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You're sitting there scratching your head going, wait, when did that happen? And that's exactly the point. This move happened earlier in the offseason, but it got completely buried under all the other massive headlines. We had the Myles Garrett trade shaking up the league. We had A.J. Brown getting moved. The NFL world was in absolute chaos. And in the middle of all that madness, Pittsburgh quietly went out and secured themselves a legitimate weapon. Let me paint the picture for you. Think back over the last few seasons. What has been the one constant struggle for the Steelers' offense? Finding that reliable second option in the passing game. It's been like searching for buried treasure. Remember when the team finally made that blockbuster move to bring in DK Metcalf? Steelers fans everywhere were celebrating. Finally, Pittsburgh had that true number one threat. That guy who could stretch the field and demand double teams. The excitement was real. DK was supposed to pair beautifully with George Pickens, giving the Steelers one of the most dangerous receiving duos in the entire league. But then what happened? Just a couple weeks after acquiring DK, the front office turned around and shipped George Pickens to the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, talk about whiplash, right? One minute you think you've got two elite receivers, and the next minute you're back to square one trying to figure out who's going to line up opposite your number one guy. So last season rolls around, and yes, DK Metcalf absolutely proved he's a true alpha receiver. The man was everything Pittsburgh hoped he would be. But here's where it gets rough. Look at the production from the rest of that receiver room. Calvin Austin was the second leading receiver on the entire team. Now, I've got nothing against Calvin Austin. He's a solid player with potential. But do you know how many receiving yards he put up as the number two option? 327 yards. For the entire season. Let that sink in for a second. Your number one receiver is out there doing his thing, drawing all the attention, and your number two guy barely cracks 300 yards. That's not a recipe for offensive success in today's NFL. That's not how you sustain drives. That's not how you keep defenses honest. That massive drop-off from your top target to your second option is a problem that opposing defenses will exploit every single week. Coordinators aren't stupid. They'll load up to stop DK and dare everyone else to beat them. And when your second receiver is struggling to get 400 yards over 17 games, well, that's exactly what happens. Enter Michael Pittman Jr. This is where things get interesting. This is where the Steelers might have actually addressed a critical need without making a ton of noise about it. Let's talk about what Pittman brings to the table. This isn't some unproven rookie. This isn't a project player. This is a guy who, at the peak of his abilities, has caught 100 passes in a single season. He's eclipsed 1,000 receiving yards. He knows how to get open. He understands route running. He's got the size and physicality to win contested catches. And most importantly, he's going to command respect from opposing defenses. Think about what this does for the Pittsburgh offense. Suddenly, you can't just bracket DK Metcalf and call it a day. You can't just shade a safety over the top and press coverage on one side of the field. Now you've got a legitimate second option who's proven he can produce at a high level. Pittman finished last season with 784 yards and 7 touchdowns on 80 receptions. Now, those aren't Hall of Fame numbers, but context matters. He was doing that in a different offensive system, with different quarterback play, in a different situation entirely. Bring him to Pittsburgh, where he's going to see better coverage matchups because DK is drawing all the top cornerbacks. Where he's going to have Aaron Rodgers, yes, that Aaron Rodgers, throwing him the football. Those numbers could absolutely jump up. I'm talking 1,000 yards. I'm talking double-digit touchdowns. I'm talking about a guy who could legitimately be the missing piece that takes this offense from predictable to dangerous. And here's the beautiful part about this signing. It ties directly into what many are calling the last dance of Aaron Rodgers. The legendary quarterback is back for what he's declared will be his final season in the NFL. Rodgers, at 42 years old, about to turn 43 by the end of the season, is trying to ride off into the sunset with one more playoff run, maybe one more shot at glory. And to do that, he needs weapons. He needs guys who understand how to play with a veteran quarterback. He needs receivers who can create separation quickly, who run crisp routes, who know how to adjust on the fly. Pittman checks those boxes. He's not some young diva who needs the ball 15 times a game. He's a professional who understands his role. He'll do the dirty work. He'll move the chains on third down. He'll box out defenders in the red zone. That's exactly what you want when you're trying to maximize what could be the final year of a future Hall of Fame quarterback's career. But here's where we need to pump the brakes just a little bit, because as much as I love the Pittman signing, and as much as I think Aaron Rodgers still has something left in the tank, we have to be realistic about where the Steelers actually stand heading into this season. And the truth is, there are some legitimate concerns. Big ones. Starting with the fact that this roster is getting old. Like, really old. And I'm not just talking about Rodgers being 42, although that's obviously a huge factor. Let's run through the names. Cam Hayward, who many would argue is still your best defensive player, the heart and soul of that defensive line, is 37 years old. 37. In defensive lineman years, that's ancient. Now, Hayward is a warrior. The man has defied age and continued to produce at a high level. But Father Time is undefeated, and at some point, the wear and tear catches up. Then you've got TJ Watt and Jalen Ramsey, both 31 years old. These guys are still performing, don't get me wrong, but they're not spring chickens anymore either. They're in that zone where one wrong injury, one bad step, and suddenly you're dealing with a major absence that could derail your entire season. And if that wasn't enough, look at the additions Pittsburgh made this offseason. Michael Pittman Jr. is pushing 30. Jamal Dean is right there with him. Rico Dowdle isn't exactly a young buck either. So what did the Steelers do? They got older. They added veterans who might help in the short term, but this isn't a roster that's building for sustained success. This is a roster that's going all in right now, consequences be damned. And honestly, I get it. When you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers who's openly saying this is his last ride, you don't worry about 3 years from now. You worry about right now. You try to put the best possible team around him and see if you can catch lightning in a bottle. But the flip side of that strategy is that if it doesn't work, if the Steelers flame out in the playoffs or miss them entirely, you're looking at a roster that's going to need a serious rebuild. You're looking at expensive contracts for aging players. You're looking at a transition period that could be painful. So where does that leave Pittsburgh in the division hierarchy? Well, according to some analysts, the Steelers are projected to finish third in the AFC North. Third. That's behind both the Ravens and the Bengals. Now, I know that might sting for Steelers fans to hear, especially considering Pittsburgh won the division last season. But let's think about this logically. The Ravens didn't just sit on their hands this offseason. They made moves. They got better. Cincinnati had a down year, but they retooled and reloaded in a big way. Both of those teams are younger, more dynamic, and frankly built for sustained success in a way that Pittsburgh just isn't right now. The concern with the Steelers isn't necessarily that they're going to fall off a cliff. It's that they're stuck in that middle ground. They're not bad enough to bottom out and rebuild, but they're not good enough to seriously compete for a championship. We're talking about an 8-9, 9-8 type of team. The kind of squad that might sneak into the playoffs as a wild card, but gets bounced in the first round. That's not what Steelers Nation wants to hear, but it might be the reality. And the biggest question mark hanging over all of this is Aaron Rodgers himself. Look, I respect the hell out of what Rodgers has accomplished in his career. Multiple MVP awards, a Super Bowl ring, one of the most talented quarterbacks to ever play the game. But we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. He's 42 years old. He's got one foot out the door. He's already announced this is his last season. And historically, when players start talking about retirement, when they start making those kinds of declarations, the performance tends to decline. It's just human nature. You can't have the same intensity, the same hunger, the same edge when you know you're counting down the days until you walk away. Rodgers had a decent season last year for the Steelers. He wasn't terrible. He managed the offense, won the division, got them to the playoffs. For a lot of people, that felt like the perfect storybook ending. Ride off into the sunset after a solid year, leave the fans with good memories. But instead, he's coming back for one more. And I can't help but wonder if this is going to be one of those situations where a legend holds on just 1 year too long. We've seen it happen before. Great players who don't know when to walk away, who tarnish their legacy by struggling through a final season that everyone wishes hadn't happened. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Rodgers proves all the doubters wrong and has a fantastic year. Maybe the addition of Pittman gives him the tools he needs to succeed. Maybe the offense clicks and Pittsburgh surprises everybody. But man, it's hard to get truly excited about a team that's this old, this dependent on aging veterans, this clearly in win-now mode with all the risks that come with it. And speaking of risks and rewards, let's talk about another name that's been floating around Steelers circles lately. Stefon Diggs. Now, before anyone gets too hyped up, let me be crystal clear. This is not confirmed. This is not official. This is rumor and speculation at this point. But the possibility of Stefon Diggs joining the Steelers is absolutely worth discussing, because if it happens, it changes everything. Imagine for a second that Pittsburgh actually pulls the trigger on bringing in Diggs. You'd have DK Metcalf on one side, Michael Pittman on the other side, and now Stefon Diggs in the slot, or rotating through different positions. That's not just adding another name to the roster. That's building a receiving core that could genuinely stress out defensive coordinators every single week. Diggs brings something different than both DK and Pittman. He's a master route runner. The guy understands leverage, spacing, and how to create separation in tight windows. When everything is collapsing and the quarterback needs an answer right now, Diggs knows how to be in the right place at the right time. With Aaron Rodgers under center, that matters. Rodgers is a timing quarterback. He needs receivers who understand how to work back to the ball, how to sit down in zones, how to adjust routes based on coverage. Diggs has been doing that at an elite level for years. You pair that kind of experience and savvy with the physical dominance of DK and the reliability of Pittman, and suddenly you've got an offense that doesn't have to fight and claw for every single yard. You've got an offense that can actually punish defenses for being aggressive. You've got an offense that can convert 3rd and 6 without it feeling like a minor miracle. But here's the other side of the equation, and this is crucial. Adding weapons on offense only matters if your defense can hold up its end of the bargain. And that brings us to TJ Watt. This man is the heartbeat of the Steelers' defense. He's not just another good pass rusher. He's not just a guy you mention before the game and move on. TJ Watt is a game wrecker. He's the kind of player that forces offensive coordinators to completely alter their game plans. Quarterbacks feel him before he even gets there. Tackles need help. Tight ends have to stay in and chip. Running backs can't release into routes because they're needed in protection. That kind of pressure changes everything. It speeds up decision-making. It forces bad throws. It creates turnovers. One strip sack from TJ Watt can completely flip the momentum of a game. Short field for the offense. The stadium erupts. Suddenly, a close game becomes a blowout. That's Steelers football. That's the identity this team has built its reputation on for decades. And as long as TJ Watt is on that defensive line, that identity remains intact. So when we talk about potentially adding Stephon Diggs, we can't look at it in isolation. The real question is whether Pittsburgh can build a team that's dangerous on both sides of the ball. Because in today's AFC, you can't survive with just one dimension. The Ravens are going to pound you physically. The Bengals can score in a hurry with their explosive playmakers. The Browns want to drag you into a street fight and grind you down. The Chiefs are always the gold standard. The Bills aren't going anywhere. If the Steelers want to be taken seriously as legitimate contenders, they need the offensive firepower to put points on the board and the defensive monsters to prevent opponents from doing the same. That's why this offseason feels so pivotal. That's why every move, every signing, every rumor matters. Because Pittsburgh is at a crossroads. They can either capitalize on this final year of Aaron Rodgers and make a real run, or they can fall short and face a brutal rebuilding process with an aging, expensive roster. There's no middle ground here. It's all or nothing. And for Steelers fans, that's both exciting and terrifying. Now, let's be real about Stephon Diggs for a minute. Even if Pittsburgh does bring him in, he's not a magic solution. Age is a factor. Cost is a factor. Role and fit matter. You don't make a move just because a name is famous. But if the Steelers can get the right version of Diggs, in the right role, at the right price, then yes, it absolutely changes the calculus. It gives Rodgers another veteran weapon he can trust. It takes pressure off DK Metcalf. It gives the offense more structure and more answers against different defensive looks. And with TJ Watt anchoring the defense, you've got a formula that could work. The question is whether the front office is willing to go all in. Are they willing to take on the risk? Are they willing to mortgage a bit of the future for one more shot at glory? Because make no mistake, that's what we're talking about here. This isn't a sustainable long-term strategy. This is a win-now approach with everything that entails. And you know what? Maybe that's exactly what Pittsburgh needs to do. Maybe when you have a Hall of Fame quarterback playing his final season, you throw caution to the wind. You stack the roster with talent, and you let the chips fall where they may. Because the alternative is playing it safe, being mediocre, and watching other teams compete for championships while you're stuck in neutral. Steelers Nation has never been about playing it safe. This is a franchise built on toughness, on championship pedigree, on doing whatever it takes to win. If that means going all in on aging veterans for one last ride, then so be it. The fans will show up. Heinz Field will be rocking. And maybe, just maybe, this team can pull off something special. But it's going to take everything coming together. Aaron Rodgers needs to prove he's still got it at 42. Michael Pittman needs to step up and be that legitimate second option. If Stephon Diggs joins the mix, he needs to stay healthy and produce. DK Metcalf needs to keep being the dominant force he's been. And on defense, TJ Watt needs to continue terrorizing quarterbacks and setting the tone week after week. If all those pieces fall into place, the Steelers could be dangerous. They could be a team that nobody wants to face in January. But if even one or two of those pieces falter, if Rodgers shows his age, if the receiving core doesn't gel, if the defense can't generate enough pressure, then we're looking at a disappointing season and a harsh reality check. That's the tightrope Pittsburgh is walking right now. High risk, high reward. All in or bust. So Steelers Nation, what do you think? Is Michael Pittman Jr. the answer at receiver? Can Aaron Rodgers deliver one more magical season? Would adding Stephon Diggs push this offense over the top? And is TJ Watt still the most feared defensive player in the AFC? I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me if you think the Steelers are legitimate contenders or if this roster is too old to compete. Smash that like button if you're riding with the black and gold no matter what. And make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on because we're bringing you every update, every rumor, and every piece of breaking news about your Pittsburgh Steelers. This season is going to be a wild ride, and you don't want to miss a single moment. Let's go Steelers.